This is the Concealed Carry Podcast, Season 12, Episode 18. And welcome to the Concealed Carry Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com network, brought to you by HK. Today is Wednesday, December 17th, 2025. As of the recording of this episode, I am your host, Riley Bowman. And this is a special episode. We got a special guest with us. He's actually the host of the Firearm Trainers Podcast, and that is Rob Beckman.
Afternoon, Riley. Thanks for having me on.
I'm glad to have you, man. It's been a while since we had you on. You've been on a few times before, of course, but you're back today in a kind of with a little bit of a different perspective and purpose, which I'm excited to talk with you about. We're going to be talking about changes and things going on at the NRA. Lots of good things I think happening there, and you're gonna give us a skinny on much of that, as well as talk about what you think can be done going forward in the future with this, this pretty old organization now at this point. It's been representing us as American gun owners for a long time, and we hope it'll continue to do so for many, many years to come in an effective manner. And Rob is actually running for the NRA Board of Directors for this upcoming election here in just a couple of months. And so we wanted to have this opportunity to talk about that and to give people an opportunity to get to know you a little bit better and kind of your position on things. And so that's what we're here for today. Glad to have you, man.
Well, I'm glad to be back, and I'm glad to be talking about the NRA because, as I've been telling a lot of people, we need the NRA as much as we need a lot of the other 2A groups for it. They each have their own focus area. It's the challenge of the NRA is they've had challenges over the last 10 or 15 years for a multitude of problems, and that's where I've kind of thrown my hat in the ring this time around to run for the board of directors. Over the last 5 years, I was able to help several other board members get elected, collect signatures for them, get the word out about what they stand for. Because over the last 5 years, have been very difficult for the NRA. They had the lawsuit from the New York Attorney General that cost them a lot of money for it. That was, there was no grounds for that. What they were being sued over originally. What they did find in the process of all the discovery for that is they did find some issues with the executives that were running the NRA at the time. And glad to say that those have been addressed. They still some things are working out through the court system overall, but those executives have been replaced. And they've been replaced with what I'll call a new group of people, reformers that want to see the NRA be a strong organization, but also too, they don't want to make the same mistakes again. They don't want to be the old boys club. They want to be inclusive of all everybody who wants to support 2A rights overall. And that's kind of where when they approached me about it, I reluctantly said yes. But then also in saying yes, I'm going to go full bore into it and do everything I can to help promote the NRA. And also at the same time, and because I don't want to make it sound as if I'm just promoting the NRA, but I also want to promote members' interests to the NRA, because the NRA is not some other organization. The NRA is us. They provide us with representation in Washington. They provide us with grants on local level. If you've got a Boy Scout, Girl Scout, Royal Rangers, Trail Life, 4-H, FFA, local sportsman's club, they're all eligible to apply for grants. So it helps us not just in Washington, but locally. And then when you go along and start thinking about the NRA provides training every year through their education training program on rifle, shotgun, pistol, on muzzle loading. They are the number one training organization when it comes to firearms. Now, there's a lot of other organizations that provide great training in different areas, but the NRA does the largest amount out there. Most of your sportsman's club, most of your rifle, pistol clubs, they are associated with the NRA, put some kind of their programs on. But that's also, I think, the opportunity to go along and have the members' voices heard, because yes, all those things that I've said are great, but we can't sit on our laurels and just say, hey, we got great training today. Well, we also need to go along and make new training. We got to figure out what people need today, versus what they needed last year or 20 or 30 years ago for it. And those are some of the things that I'm hoping, if I can make it on the board of directors, that I can help focus to that, because we've got different guns nowadays than what we had 10 years ago, 20, 30 years ago. I mean, how many people 10 years ago had red dot sights?
Yeah, right.
Not a lot of people. 20
Yep.
years ago, it probably wasn't as dominant as we do with striker fires for it. A lot of them were the double action, single action type of pistols. And you go back 40 years, and everybody was shooting revolvers. And you
Yeah.
just realize that things change. And with that change, the NRA needs to adjust their training, need to adjust what they're doing in order to meet the needs of the members at that time. If all they provided was revolver training by today's standards, it's going to miss the mark. Same thing with, we've seen constitutional carry over the last 20 plus years sweep across the nation, where you got 50 states where everybody can go along and apply and get a concealed carry license now. Over the last 10 years, we've also seen 29 states pass permitless carry.
Yep.
And I'm for permitless carry. For a law-abiding citizen, you should be able to carry, a firearm. But there are nuances with that you need to know about when it comes to some legal aspects of it. There's nuances as far as making sure that you know how to properly carry it. I mean, I support your right to go along and be able to carry the firearm, but if you're just throwing it in your pocket without a good holster, that's not responsible. If you're going along and you've got your finger on the trigger, when you are pointing it at somebody, or you using it to intimidate somebody, I don't support that, because that's not lawful for it. And those are a lot of the different pieces that, when I teach classes, people are surprised. When you go along and watch Hollywood, watch police dramas, and you see what they're doing, you emulate that, and all of a sudden it's like the warning shots. They get you in trouble. You go along, point at somebody to go along and intimidate them. You get in trouble for that. All these things that we see on TV and on movies, you can get in trouble for, and that's where a saying that I have in my classes: when you get brand new students in, over 80% of what they think they know about guns is wrong. Now, you've got a very small part of it, and that's where they're going to think if they take the Glock and they turn it 90 degrees sideways, they can shoot it better, right? You've seen that on movies before. And we all know it's like, no, that doesn't work. A good two-handed grip, good, focus on the sights, making sure you've got good grip. All those things are foundational and fundamental in order to, for good marksmanship. And it does, the faster you shoot, the faster you're gonna miss. And those are all things that people need to get the training. Whether you've got a plastic card issued by your state or not, you're still required to go along and be responsible with your firearm. Responsible how you store it. Responsible how you go along and shoot it. How you display it. Even what do you do with it in your car? You just can't throw it on the front seat. Something like that. Say, oh, nobody's going to take it, because we've seen way too much of that lately, where somebody breaks into cars and grabs that out of a glove box. Yes, I know they're criminals. I know they broke into a car, but at the same time, how much time would it take for you to have a small lockbox that's cabled to the frame of the car that would keep them from being able to take it, in 10 seconds? Yeah, it might take them 2 minutes, but most criminals don't want to spend that much time after making a bunch of noise and sitting there trying to yank or cut a cable that's attached to the car. And those are things where, as firearm owners, we need to ensure that we're talking about responsible, because if we don't talk about what responsible firearm ownership is, you're going to have the politicians going along and passing laws that say, if your gun's stolen out of your car, you're going to get charged with this, which I don't see a lot of logic in it, because you're already a crime victim, and now we're going to go along and make you a legal victim at the same time for a criminal breaking into your car. But we also don't want to go along and leave guns sit around. You've got small kids, Riley, at your house. I got grandkids in my house. You don't leave guns lay around because it's not responsible. Yes, people have their own ways of doing things, and instead of having mandatory storage requirements that, again, is a political response to it, let's be responsible. And as farm owners talk about, hey, I've got this really nice, quick access box that I can put it in, and I can get it within a couple seconds. And that's a couple seconds is definitely worth it when you've got kids around, when you've got, other people, call them unauthorized people that should be touching a gun that could come in contact with it. Or, I'm not home and somebody can't break in the house and then go rooting through and finding a pistol between the cushions, or going along and breaking into the gun cabinet, something along those lines. Yeah. So, there's a lot of things that I'm hoping to bring up and, bring focus to the NRA, because, we need them. And, we just need to bring the focus back to where they can be a strong NRA representing all the farm owners and 2A, concerns.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, dude, that was quite an opening monologue, we'll call it. Like, lay it on us, bro. I mean, bam. You covered a lot of ground there, but kind of also established a framework and a context that we can use to discuss a number of things for the remainder of this episode today. Again, folks, we're here today to talk about the NRA, National Rifle Association, and reform that really needs to happen, has been happening, has needed to happen for a long time. Like you said, like 15 years or something like that. I was like, probably could be arguably, even longer than that there were some things that were not quite going so well. But also just to talk about the coming future and in the wave of new faces that are looking to become a part of this guiding board of directors of this, still what, to my knowledge, I mean, I don't think anything has changed there. I know some of these other groups maybe have grown a little bit, but it's still the largest 2A, focused organization for American gun owners. And that's a big deal. I don't know, as much heat and crap as the NRA has caught over the years, and much of it rightfully so, and including of their own make in many respects. And of course, the left is, meaning that the anti-gunners are always happy to go after the NRA and use it as the bad guy, the big wolf in the hen house, so to speak, and to denigrate the NRA and what its mission and what it stands for. It's a big deal that there are millions of people that are represented by an organization that says, we stand behind the Second Amendment. And that's, I would say to a lot of what you were just talking about, Rob, and kind of where you ended up too, that what I would like to see happen is that the NRA gets back to what I think the government should get back to, and that is a government for the people, by the people. And I think the NRA needs to abide by a similar principle, which is that it should be for the people, for its members, and by those people. Meaning that, in the past where, I mean, we don't need to disparage anybody necessarily, but everybody knows who Wayne LaPierre is. And he was not particularly well liked. He was there for a long time. I would say that there were probably many good things that happened under his leadership, but there were many not so good things that happened. And one of those things I would argue is that I think there were a certain, and granted, I don't know the inner workings. So some of this may just be perception, but I don't think I'm too far off base. But there seemed to be, as you mentioned, kind of the good old boys club that was in charge, and that it was more about, for some of them, enriching themselves than about actually running an organization that's for the people and by the people, So anyway, I like a lot of what I just heard from you, and I think that's awesome. Before we get too deep into the weeds here, I thought I'd mention our first episode sponsor today, which is Heckler and Koch. Heckler-Koch.com, I believe, is the website. HECKLER-KOCH. Having a hard time spelling today. I'm normally pretty good at spelling. You can also just search HK. But in reality, guys, go down to your local, yes, local if you can, local gun store, gun business, and buy a new gun this week for Christmas. And that new gun, I think, should be an HK. So, not just I'm not just tooting HK's horn here, but tooting all those small businesses, local gun shops, and things that, frankly, I mean, things have not been easy. I've seen a couple of local stores shut down this year. Low gun sales, traffic's just not what it used to be. Maybe more people are buying online, or at the very least, people just aren't spending money like they once were. So, but hey, give some of those local gun businesses some of your business this holiday season, I would hope. Because
And here's something that I point out too when it comes to local.
Yeah,
I like going in them because you can go along and find some real gems in there from time to time.
Oh yeah.
You want to go along and find a really cool rifle. Go, it may not you may not be able to find it online, but all of a sudden you go into a local gun store and you find a 1871 Winchester, or you find these different ones. There's a gun shop here close to me out in Indiana, and they've actually got a 45 Hoosier, which is a Wildcat round, and people would probably have to look it up, but it's one of those things where I keep eyeing it. I haven't bought it yet because I just don't have time to play with it, but it's a Remington 700 action. It comes with the reloading dies and everything else like that to reload, because it's a Wildcat.
Yeah.
But that would be, I keep going along every time I look at it, like, man, that would be a really cool kind of rifle to have. And it ain't one of those that you're going to be able to go along and Google and find it. And I run across those interesting things from time to time, to where it's like, where'd that one come in? And like, yeah, it just came in, yesterday, and blah 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 about it. And you start finding out some of these, older rifles that are no longer being sold. And you can get some real gems if you know what you're looking at. And again, support local ones, whether that is buying a rifle or buying some ammo from them, because they're going to take care of you if you take care of them.
Absolutely, and that's the key. I mean, that you not all gun shops are created equal. I've been in some where the folks there were just real jerks and not helpful at all. It's like, I feel like I was there doing them a favor by just showing up, versus the other way around, where it's like, you have a business, and it's a service related business. Even though you're selling product, it's also a service. And yeah, so, but there's always those good ones too, and find them, and be loyal to those people, because they'll take care of you, especially if there's something that's unique, maybe you're looking for, that doesn't come around very often. And you can say, hey, can you keep an eye out for, such model of gun or whatever. And I know a few folks that will do that for you, some of these smaller shops. And, hey, they'll call you up. I got one of these in, you might want to come check it out, kind of thing. And that's a good source to have if there's stuff that you're looking for. So,
yeah, and rifles, pistols, shotguns. You tell them you're looking for a Gen 1 Glock, or you're looking for an HK rifle, specifically. Especially ones that are not being produced anymore, that can't be ordered. They'll keep their eye open, because you'd be surprised if you sit around a gun shop long enough. There'll be somebody that comes in there and they'll say, I'm moving, and I've got 30 rifles I need to sell, and here's a listing, and go back and forth, and all of a sudden you'll find out that, hey, you're going to get some really nice Browning shotguns in. Well, what can we work out on this? They don't have to do any work besides doing the transfer on it, and you can get some nice ones. At the same time, if they know you're looking for something, somebody comes in there and says, hey, I got this old Savage, I'm trying to sell it. My dad passed away, and do you know anybody who might be interested? And it's like, an old Savage. I remember Rob coming in asking about old Savages, and here, give him a call, and you guys might be able to work out a deal. And again, they're being a resource for you. Just, like I go along when people ask me, well, where should I buy my gun? Well, go down the street and go to these guys and purchase your gun, because, they also take care take care of you. If you have a little problem with it, one shop I go to, they got a gunsmith in the back, and give me a minute, I can take a look at that and see why that's a little rough on the trigger, and boom, 5 minutes later you're walking out. I've never had that with anybody online, be able to do it 5 minutes later, have something fixed.
Yep, 100%. So there you go. That's our first sponsor message today. Is really, it's HK, but just in the form of, you go down to your local gun shop, and if you care, okay, because that's what I'm carrying and what I trust my life to is, I got an HK VP9 on my belt right now, and also love the CC9, which is kind of the new hotness. Great little gun, super reliable, and hey, hopefully your local shop has some HKs in stock. Go pick one up. That would be greatly appreciated. They support us. They support the podcast to make this possible. So, all right. One thing I was just thinking about, Rob, is I think in light of recent events, meaning that over the weekend there were a couple of bad shootings. I don't think I have to really, mention what they are too much. People probably see enough in the news, or at least see something mentioned. But we had this bad shooting at Brown University over the weekend here in the U.S., and of course a horrific mass shooting that took place on Bondi Beach in Australia. And I mean, just terrible, terrible things. And that Australian one, of course, is just, it just, man, it really, I mean, all shootings are terrible, but this is the type of event where you got a whole bunch of people, families, from old to young, kids and parents and grandparents, and everybody assembled and just having a good time. And, you're a family man and I'm a family man. And so it just tugs at those heartstrings a little bit to see families just completely ripped apart by violence like that. And
especially around the holidays like this, because that's when you see everybody normally, and
right.
it's a real shame.
Yeah, I mean, this was pretty obviously targeting Jews as they were celebrating the lighting of the first candle for Hanukkah, and just terrible. This sort of thing shouldn't happen, but it did happen, and these kinds of things do happen, and they happen in all sorts of places all around the world, even in places with very strict gun control. And one of the first things you start hearing is how, well, we need even stricter gun control, and we need, gun control like they have. Well, the argument was we need Australian style gun control here. But not to make this about that necessarily. However, we are talking about the NRA, and one of its purposes, one of its missions is to stand up in defense of our Second Amendment and the rights that are associated with that, which is super, super important because, I mean, having an organization like the NRA, again, just like not even just thinking of in the instruction side of things or the other various programs the NRA is involved with, which are very, very important programs, but just by the fact that when you have anti-gunners who on mainstream media are out there talking, out their butts about how we need more gun control and how wicked and evil the NRA is, that tells you that the NRA is still an organization to be respected by nature of the size and the millions of members that it represents. That carries weight. That's important. And not just on even legislative action, which there's many things the NRA is involved in with, and a lot of times together with these other gun rights organizations. I mean, you see many times these major lawsuits that are working their way through the courts and whatnot that aren't just backed by, Firearm Policy Coalition or Gun Owners of America, but a lot of times have NRA and GOA or NRA and FPC or NRA, GOA and FPC all involved, all contributing in some way, contributing funds. Sometimes it's just in the nature of, GOA launched a thing, but NRA files an amicus brief. All of these things are important and are essential to the mission of the organization. Like, I know you got a response, but coming back to, I want you to take this on in two forms here. My main point is the NRA is also the forerunner in terms of who is top of mind for legislators when they think about gun rights issues and gun-related legislation. And certainly on the anti-gunner side, NRA comes to mind because that by nature of how often they attack the NRA. But we are going to lose more ground if a large-scale nationwide organization isn't also at the forefront of folks that need to be doing work on the pro-gun side as well to combat all the anti-gun effort that's taking place, is my point. And that's the best organization suited for that is the NRA, just by nature of size. So now I hand it off to you for some comments.
Yeah, and the NRA is 3 million members. You know, whenever you go along, think about 3 million people calling up their legislators. They will get a response from them because there are 3 million people that are very much engaged from that standpoint. The other thing, when you go along, the NRA takes a lot of the heat for it because they are that face of a lot of gun owners that are out there for it. When you go along, look at the Second Amendment Foundation, they do a lot of litigation. They're the ones that are going from the Supreme Court. GOA is doing a lot of grassroots effort. And the good thing I will say from a 2025 perspective is the NRA is playing ball with all these organizations better than they ever have. And what I mean by that is under the old leadership, if it wasn't an NRA ID, they didn't do it. Which sounds kind of counterproductive, but there were instances to where they just did not play ball with the other organizations. This year, with the big beautiful bill, they put their efforts behind it, and it got passed. We got the NFA suppressor tax down to zeros, and so that's a big win for firearm ownership as a whole. They're also going along and pushing for things such as national reciprocity for concealed carry. They're also pushing things. Working with those other groups in order to get things in front of the Supreme Court. We go along, and in our minds, having an armed populace is having a polite and safe populace for it. And there's plenty of politicians in a lot of different places that go along and see that the way that we fix the problems with people's behavior is we just take guns away. Make it harder for people to get guns. And just like we saw in Australia, when nobody has guns except for the bad guys get to go along and shoot more. The one image that's kind of in my mind about it is I saw it in the press where they had 2 police officers with their hands up because they don't carry guns in Australia. Now when you go along and think about it, I would like to live in a utopia to where we don't have to worry about bad things happening. But I'm also realistic that I don't live in utopia, and because of that, I've got to go along and take responsibility for myself. One of the things I've done on my podcast talking about is first aid. Be able to do some basic first aid. We all know 911. We can pick up the phone, and the fire department, paramedics, they'll come racing. Well, think about it. What are they? 5, 10, 15 minutes away? And that's calling 911. When you apply that same kind of logic when it comes to a criminal who's actively committing a crime of shooting people and such, do you really want to wait 5 minutes? That's a lifetime. And those are a lot of the what I'll call logic that we need to bring to a lot of the politicians for, because the laws they're passing only impact the law abiding. If I go along and say you can't have more than 10 rounds in your gun at a time, you and I will comply with that law because we're law abiding. Criminals, they're not going to care because they've already broken the laws to begin with. The way to address crime is to go along and say, if you break the law, you've got to go along and serve your time and get you out of society and make sure they realize it. We've got a big issue right now. You hear, in the news are the Glock switches and everything. They can take a standard Glock and turn it into a machine pistol. They're illegal, 110% illegal. The thing about it is they also carry with it, if you manufacture a machine gun illegally, a 10 to 20 year prison sentence, in federal prison. why aren't more people that are doing all these, machine pistols? Why aren't more of them being sentenced, 10 years in federal prison?
Mhm.
When you go along and realize that you don't need to pass more laws, you just got to enforce the ones that you do have. Then it starts making, a little bit more sense about why we've got to have a strong voice in the NRA to point this out to the politicians. Because if all they're doing is passing another law, that's going to be another law that gets ignored by the criminal and doesn't change the criminal's behavior. You got to do something to change the criminal's behavior, because the number of guns I have, my magazine capacity, all those types of things, nobody cares about. But if I'm a criminal, I shouldn't have those. It's no different than if I own 4 or 5 cars or 100 pairs of shoes. Nobody cares about that as long as I'm not a criminal. If I'm a criminal, I'm using my F-150s that rob banks with, people aren't happy with. Same thing if I'm using my Glock to rob the bank with, I shouldn't be doing that. And the crime is robbing the bank, not going along and having a pistol or driving an F-150.
Yeah. Yeah. For sure. I mean, the point, of course, again, here being that the work that organizations like the NRA does is really important, and it's important that it's not just even getting engaged when it feels like it's crisis mode, time where like, oh, major anti-gun legislation has been proposed. Well, let's get working, fellas. No, like we need to be working constantly, because what we're dealing with is constant attacks against our Second Amendment rights. And that's not going away.
No.
Those folks, they are not quitting. They don't go to sleep. They don't take a break. It's constant. And so the work that the NRA does, and these other organizations too, and I'm glad to see that more of them are working together more often and more frequently and in better ways, collectively all together. I think all these organizations are a good thing, and especially when they work together, because then it's almost like you create a pseudo organization where that's a lot bigger than. I know there's some crossover in membership between organizations, but at the same time, there's some folks that are a member of one organization and they're not a member of another organization, and so really there's millions and millions of people that are represented. The 3 million estimate that you gave of current NRA membership is notable, because that's basically a little less than 1% of the total U.S. population.
Mm-hmm.
And that's crazy to think about. That's like, on the one hand, it's like, man, we need more. We need more. On the other hand, it's still 3 million plus people, which is not insignificant either.
Mm-hmm.
And so, but yeah, anyway, the work's super important. And the work is not just about fighting about even specific legislation issues, but also just being right there, constantly knocking on congressmen and congresswomen's doors, constantly, making contacts, networking on the political side of things, so that, we are not forgotten, and that people don't overlook things, and that, that fight is just continuing on, because we have to be, I think, just as engaged on the pro-gun side as the anti-gunners are on the anti-gun side. Because again, they're not sleeping at night. Like, that's a constant battle that's not going away.
One thing that's really good that just came out last week is I forget who the organization was, but they ranked lobbyists in Washington, D.C. on effectiveness. And the NRA, Institute for Legislative Action, John Comerford, was ranked as one of the top lobbyists in Washington, D.C. He's working for the NRA, working to knock on those congressmen's door to go along and make sure that they understand what the law-abiding gun owners want, and identifying that some of the bills they have cross over into areas, things like range development.
Yeah.
Sometimes people go along or politicians propose bills that would go along and make it really difficult to have a shooting range because of how they word it, and changing the wording a little bit makes a big difference. The same thing also when it comes to like education bills. You go along and say, okay, where would education come in? Well, some of the education bills specifically ignore or prohibit, education on guns for it. I applaud Tennessee this year where they went along and they were introducing hunter education into their high schools so the kids can learn a little bit about gun safety for it and, wildlife conservation. I'd like to see the NRA take a really strong position to promote gun safety at all ages. You got a kindergarten to third grade to sixth grade, something along those lines, and be able to engage them not just with some colorful posters. They've had the Eddie Eagle program for a long time. It's been really successful, but also go along and really get out there from a social media standpoint. That's one of the things in the last 10 years, podcasts, social media, TikTok, all these, Facebook have really taken off. The NRA is still stuck in doing some old ways of doing things, and that's where they've really got to start thinking about where are their membership at? What does the membership need? Because as we go along and look at the membership, we got 3 million members, but during the pandemic, there were 8 million new gun owners, according to the National Shooting Sports Foundation, and those 8 million new gun owners should have seen a reason to join the NRA. Almost every manufacturer puts an NRA membership in their boxes and new firearms for it. A lot of those people were women. A lot of those people were minorities. And those are areas to where the NRA has really got to go along and look and say, okay, how are we viewed by women? Why aren't women joining? Why aren't the minorities joining? If we're fighting for their rights, their Second Amendment rights, everybody should get behind it and say, if I don't support these guys, somebody might come along and take my guns down the road. And those are all things where we've really got to look at the messaging that's coming out and making sure people realize it's not just a rural thing. If you live out on a farm, you should be an NRA member. No, if you're in the suburbs, you should be, as well as being in a urban setting too. Somebody such as, we both know Maj Toure and all the work that he's done in Philadelphia there. Those are things that you really want to encourage, because again, that encourages, responsible gun ownership for it. And the more responsible people can be, the less accidents we're going to have. You're not going to go along and have somebody leave a firearm sit around in their house where a 3-year-old gets a hold of it. At the same time, you're not going to go along and have somebody breaking into a car and stealing somebody's guns for it. All those different kinds of resources to make sure that when they go along and start talking about firearms, that there's a definitive line between lawful gun ownership and the criminal. Criminals, we've already got laws that make murder illegal. We've already got laws that go along say you can't steal, you can't do those types of things, and making sure those laws are being enforced properly with the proper penalties too. When somebody goes along and using a gun and selling drugs and they get out 30 days later, you got to scratch your head. It's like we're not very serious about controlling drug dealing and guns if we let a drug dealer out in 30 days from jail.
Yeah. As a country, we have many problems. And to your point, the guns are, or at least should be, among the least of those problems listed. So many other things that we could focus on. I wanted to just touch base. You opened the can, so I'm going to go there. You mentioned something, about how we had all these new gun owners during the COVID years, especially. Many of those women and minority groups of people. And I kind of suspect that not many of those new gun owners joined the NRA or organizations like the NRA. And one of the reasons why I suspect that, some of it's an image thing. Like, just using the NRA as an example, like if you were to ask me to stereotype membership of the NRA, I'd be like, old white guys.
Yep.
You know what I mean? Like, you don't disagree, do you?
Nope.
And unfortunately, people are more likely to join organizations that they can identify with, that they feel a kinship with. that are more like them and that are doing things that they believe in. And whether, like, even if those new gun owners believe in Second Amendment rights, it's like, well, but that organization or there, that doesn't really look like me. And there's all of this negative press out there that exists, right? Some of it is deserved and some of it is undeserved, because again, we're fighting against this massive anti-gun complex, hugely funded, group of people that want to take us down. There's this concept, I've been referring to it more recently because I remember learning about it, a few years ago, and then I read an article about it recently, and it's called Brandolini's law, or Brandolini's principle. I don't know if you've heard of that, but it's not a true like law or anything like that. But when you hear what I'm about to explain, you'll be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, you'll be like, yeah, that totally makes that's true. And what it is Brandolini's law or principle is it's understanding that it takes a huge amount of effort to overcome or counter bad information because of the relative ease of creating bad information. So you got these two, diametrically opposed things. And one is putting bad information out there especially in today's world and social media and the internet and everything, right? Like, anybody with an account of any kind with a fake email address can create a YouTube channel, can create a, Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, whatever, X, account, and then just start posting whatever. True or not true doesn't matter, because the ease of doing that is easy. It's a very low bar. And the amount of work it takes to overcome bad information, yes, while we all are able to do that, it just takes so much more work and effort to overcome bad or low quality information. And so you have a lot of people that don't like gun rights organizations, don't like the NRA, and that is going to take a ton of effort to overcome. It's going to take a ton of effort to overcome the stereotypical image of an NRA member, and that's unfortunate. But what I'd like to ask you about now, and you're running for the board of directors. What is your vision of the future of the organization? How would you describe the members of that organization?
Well, the first thing I would like to see the NRA position itself as the knowledge source when it comes to guns. If somebody's got a fully automatic clip, that somebody immediately raises a red flag and says, wait a minute, the NRA defines that as this. So you're wrong about that, to make sure that we get the right message out there. When we hear politicians or different people going along and using terms inappropriately for it, it'd be great for the NRA to be that source, because once it becomes the definitive source of what we'll call firearm knowledge for it, to where you can go and look it up, then I think you start drawing people in there, because it's not just a political organization that is pushing, for 2A rights, but it's an organization that is truly based on the knowledge of it, about, responsibility to, whether I'm, green, white, yellow, blue, male, female, whatever, I identify as. I see them as being a, welcoming organization for anybody to learn about firearms. If I want to go out and I want to shoot a shotgun, I can find a club, I can find an organization, I can find a trainer that will help me, learn how to use a shotgun. Same thing with a rifle. If I want to go along, get into pistol competitions, I know where to go along, do pistol competitions. NRA does a ton of competitions out there. Most people don't even know about it. They think about them being only in Washington, D.C., when in reality they do over 11,000 competitions a year throughout the United States. So it's a massive type of thing, but some of that is the best kept secrets for it. And that's where they really need to go along and work on the branding, on the messaging, so that people see it as that one place that, okay, I've got questions for it. And my gun shop told me, join the NRA, and, they've got a whole library available to, to answer your questions. Same time, the NRA will tell you, here's a list of trainers that are nearby you that can go along and help you, get your concealed carry permit, or take you from being, from your concealed carry class up and feel that you've got a little better ability to defend yourself and your family. Because as a United States citizen, you have the ability to go along and defend your family. It's a God-given right to self-defense, in my opinion. But we also need to have the responsibility to get the proper training for it. And all those things kind of go hand in hand in making I think the NRA be a welcoming organization. Yes, there's been plenty of women's organizations that have started up, and they're great. There have been minority organizations that have come up, but at the same time, if you ask any of them, when it comes to getting things done in Washington, D.C., the NRA is the 900-pound gorilla for it. One of the things I did when I started collecting signatures for my run for the NRA Board of Directors to get on the ballot, I went to Gun Show in Cleveland, Ohio, and I got to stand around with Eric Pratt from Gun Owners of America. And in order to sign the petition, you've got to be a member for 5 continuous years or a lifetime member. I found out by talking to Eric Pratt, he's a lifetime NRA member. He, as the executive vice president for GOA, he believes in the NRA as well as his mission for it. While I was at the same gun show, I went to the Second Amendment Foundation and talked to Adam Kraut for a while too. Mm-hmm. Guess what? He's a lifetime member of the NRA also.
Yeah, well, and he was running for the board a number of years ago. So
yeah, he was. But it's one of those things to really think about. I mean, these, they see benefit in belonging to the NRA because Adam does a great job in litigation for it. But he sees the NRA, is that 900-pound gorilla that can go along and instead of litigating it, they can cut it off at the pass and never see the light of day for those bills that would be anti-2A for it. Same thing with Eric Pratt over the GOA. He can go along and get his membership going to really have a grassroots groundswell again to hopefully stop some of the things from happening or passing pro gun bills at those points. And it's one of those things where we've all got to kind of work together. From a 2A standpoint, nobody can be a island to itself. And one of the things that I've been doing, working really hard, is all these different organizations that are non-NRA, is I've been reaching out to a lot of them. I can't say all of them are going to do it, but most of them are going to run small little op-eds for me about my running for them, because I think it's really important for the women to see that the NRA is changing. I think it's really important for the minorities to see that the NRA is changing. And even though I'm an old white guy, I'm bringing their voices just like anybody else's voices to the NRA to say, hey, we need to go along and make sure that we have programs to support, our Hispanic members. We need to have programs for our women's members. We need to have programs that will address it appropriately, because it's too easy to go along and ignore it if they're not a large percentage. But at the same time, gun ownership among both those demographics is increasing. So we should be going along and look and see what 2A members need and meeting them there.
Absolutely, man. Great thoughts there, Rob. Hey, I got another sponsor message here. We'll take just a quick break, and that is to share that POM Pepper Spray is also an episode sponsor today. POM Pepper Spray is their website. You can go check them out. Appreciate their sponsorship and support of the Concealed Carry podcast. It's what I choose to carry and rely upon for my, just as an additional tool for my personal defense. This little guy right here, super small and concealable and seemingly insignificant, but it packs a punch in terms of the spiciness that it delivers. Anybody I know it's been sprayed with POM Pepper Spray, they do not like it. Now, there are some folks out there that have more of a resistance or immunity to things like capsaicin or OC spray, but by and large, it's a worthwhile secondary, less lethal tool. that is good to have in addition to the gun that you probably already carry. Check out pompepperspray.com. Gives you options for those times when a gun is not the answer. So thanks for their support of the podcast. Now let's get back into finishing up our discussion here on changing and reforming the NRA. Rob, tell us a little bit about, for those that don't know, tell us a little bit about how maybe give us a quick overview of the organization, like kind of the leadership organization of the NRA, and especially, tell us about what the board of directors is and what they do, their purpose, and then and then maybe you might share with us why it is that you are seeking a seat on the NRA board of directors.
Well, one thing that might surprise people: the NRA, as far as paid employees, it's only 400 people. It's not thousands of people, just 400 people. When you start dividing between the programs, they don't have a whole lot of people sitting around working on small projects. They're mostly working on big ones. The organization is ran by the executive board, which includes the executive vice president, Doug Hamlin, the president, which is Bill Bockenberg, for it, and then the first and second vice president, secretary, and the treasurer. From that standpoint, they are, except for Doug, those people are all members of the board of directors. The board of directors for the NRA is 76 members, and every year 25 members or 25 board members are up for re-election or election to it, and then that over you get to a 3-year term, and so you go along. So in 3 years or 75, where the 76 come in. The 76 director is elected at the convention from the candidates that do not make it in the first 25 for it. So it's a large group. One of the things that I want to do is start asking questions about, do we really need 76 directors? Because from my experience, that's a whole lot of cooks in the kitchen for it. And just speaking from my experience, I'm not an expert in every topic that the board of directors would need to be on, but I could definitely be in a meeting and start asking questions of a consultant or somebody brought in to do things. So there might be an opportunity there to have a few less directors and more committee members that are either volunteers or consultants that bring in, so you can drive and really have the quality program that we've been talking about here to go along. Because if I'm on a say an audit committee, I'm not a CPA, I'm not a audit person per se, but I do know how numbers should look. But I would defer to the CPAs to make sure that we're following proper accounting standards. I would, defer to, people on that side that aren't necessarily board members. And the same thing when it comes to doing different things like education and training, or doing things like legislative actions. Let's have the board members know what's going on, do what they need to do for the board, but, also go along and make sure that we don't have too many cooks in the kitchen, because then you start getting into too many problems, and it might surprise people for me to say this, but if I'm successful in reducing the number of people on the board, and that means that I lose my seat on the board, I wouldn't be upset about it, because my whole purpose behind running for the board of directors isn't really to go along and get my name up in lights. It's to go along and have a strong NRA.
Yeah.
If I in 3 years don't get reelected, or like I said, there's not a seat for me on the board, and I can say, hey, I spent 3 years, but I was able to get this and this done, that would be extremely, pleasing to me. Even for my run of collecting the signatures and such, it's been very rewarding for me, because I've been able to talk to members, non-members, and finding out exactly like we're talking about here about why should I join? What's the NRA? The NRA, they're the ones that stopped all the assault weapon bans, from going into place, and blah, and educating people, because a lot of the education that people get is, from social media or from the news. And as we've been talking about, there's a certain bias there. And people need to kind of break things down and realize that the quote unquote assault weapons are really rifles. They're semi-automatic rifles, just like a semi-automatic pistol, just like a semi-automatic shotgun. And when you break it down and they realize that you're discriminating against something based upon what they look like, that's very anti-American, in my opinion, because we don't go by what you look like. We go by what you do. And those are the things to where, a gun, shotgun, pistol, rifle, they all do the same thing. Send a little metal projectile down a tube, and whatever it's pointing at is the target that is going to hit. And being able to go along and bring that experience back to the board. And if for some reason I'm not successful in this bid, I'm not going to keep running year after year doing it. I'll bow out gracefully, but I'll support the candidates that are going along and trying to reform the NRA. Even if I don't make it, I'll support them. I will bring, people, information to them so they can see that the NRA is trying to, make inroads into minorities or, new gun owners, to, inner cities, to, rural areas, wherever they're doing it, because I think the NRA program, it has a great benefit to the United States, and people have got to kind of peel back and understand that they're not bad people. I don't think there's an NRA member that belongs to the organization that wishes harm on anybody. We're good, law-abiding citizens. That's why we've got guns, and that's one reason why it gets NRA members very upset when people start passing nonsense laws trying to restrict us, like red flag laws. I saw that come up just in the last couple of days with the recent shootings, and go along, and it's like, well, when you think about it, I don't believe red flag laws would have worked on any of the shootings over the weekend. But we also had the murder of Rob Reiner out in Hollywood, and as I understand it, it was done with a knife. And that's one of those situations to where, okay, horrendous. Obviously, his son is being has been charged with it. We'll find more details out, but it also goes along and highlights the need to, for mental health services, and that's where nobody wants to see somebody who's in a mental health crisis, have a firearm, have a mental health crisis, and be able to purchase a gun, but at the same time, we want to treat them with respect, because not everybody who is having a mental health crisis is dangerous. I mean, we all have financial problems from time to time. We have relationship problems. We have health problems, either ourselves, our spouse, our family, parents, different things along those lines, to where the weight of the world, just seems to be crushing us. But we also need to go along, firearm owners, or just, humans as a whole, and make sure that we've got some outlet, somebody to call. Because if I picked up the phone, Riley, and I called you up and said, hey, Riley, it's been a really bad day, bad day. I don't know. I don't think I should be here. You'd be like, hold on, Rob, wait a minute. Think about your grandkids. Think about your wife. All of a sudden, and as Mike Sidoni from Walk Talk America says, cause a pause. If I pause for 15 seconds and it's like, Riley, you're right, that was stupid thinking. Thanks for that. Thanks for that 15 seconds, and it turns things around. Those are the tools that we need to encourage people to have. That empathy for one another, to realize that it's life. Life is a 4-letter word, and we all have problems. We don't all have millions and $1 million in the bank, so we all got the financial challenges for it. Our kids don't always behave properly. Our health isn't always good. But we all have the ability to have that empathy to really go along and say, hey, Riley, remember this and remember that. You can get through this no matter how bad the situation might be right now. Tomorrow will be a better day. Sit down, talk to your wife, and boom, things will get better. And yeah, it might take some counseling. It might take all those types of things, but let's be responsible about it and making sure that we understand what options are available to us. We as firearm trainers, we talk about, okay, you've got this kind of sight, you've got the night sights, you've got these different kind of flat triggers. Well, guess what? That's what makes sure we can talk to our firearm owners, not talking about flat triggers and about holographic sights, but also go along and say, hey, go take this anonymous survey and find some resources to help you out. Or as I tell my instructors when I train them, make sure you become familiar with them, because the person you help might not be you. It might be somebody that you're talking to, especially now this time of year when you're around Christmas and you're seeing around family members. A simple comment can mean the world to somebody for it.
Yeah. Yeah. 100%. There's a lot there to think about and ponder. I appreciate you sharing some of your perspective on that. Going back a few minutes, you were talking about some of your vision for the organization. And I was actually really glad to hear you say that, one of your priorities and interests would be to see the size of the board of directors reduced at the NRA. That's something I've been calling for myself for quite a few years, because like you, it's just like, I don't know of any organization, any board that operates effectively that has 76 members on it. And it's just, that's just crazy. It's just, like you said, too many cooks in the kitchen.
Yeah. Well,
So,
and the thing I look at is, they're all members, they're all good people, but I'll be the first one to say, if you've already got a couple people driving results, you don't need more people coming in there and asking questions or stirring the pot more. Let those people drive it. Look at an organization. I think Apple's got 8 directors. One of the largest enterprises in the world for it, because they go along, come in there and say, okay, this is what we need from our marketing standpoint. This is what we need, product development, boom, boom. And they give the direction to the employees, and the employees go and deliver it from that point.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. What would you say in your mind would be more of an ideal size? Like, give me a number of how many you think should be on the board.
I'm not sure yet. That's why, I want to get in, because right now I'm the outside looking in, and, just like you, I'm like 76, really? There's 44 committees that they have. And, I look over the committees.
That's a lot of committees.
Yeah. I look at the committees and it's like, okay, should there be a little bit different structure to them also, as far as how they go along and do it? And with that kind of reorganization, maybe that'll flow into the board of directors, where, okay, if this committee's got 8 directors on it, maybe, if we figure, okay, that we want no more than 2 to 3 directors on any committees, then all of a sudden that'll dictate how many people we really need on the board. And then over the course of, 2 or 3 years, through attrition, different things like that, we can, get the right people. Because here's one thing I'd really like to make sure that, the people that get elected onto the board is make sure they've got some good qualifications. And again, there's been a lot of dedicated board members over time that have done a lot of different activities, but some of the names that you'll see on it are well-known names, and nothing against them, but how much qualifications, how much, are they bringing to the board to really help the organization achieve its mission? And those are all things that, again, I think the nominating committee did a really good job this year, because they looked not just with the board of directors that were up for re-election, but they also looked for people outside the board and brought, that new blood in there, because you got to have the people such as myself asking the questions like, why 76 directors? Why not go with a different number? Why have 44 committees? And once you start asking why, then you can find out maybe they're justified, or maybe you go along and it's like, it's not justified, and we can trim it down, doing, along those lines. That's where the marketing communications came up with, reduction in the magazines, because it's like you're sending on a magazine 12 times a year at this. I don't know what the cost was, but it was one of the largest line items in the budget, mailing and producing a magazine. And on top of it, the information in there is between 60 and 90 days old. So the timeliness of it was questionable also. And they made the decision to say, okay, we're going to go for 8 months out of the year, do electronic, and it'll just be 4 times a year that we go and do the print editions, which I think will be a really good, because from an NRA perspective, membership, you don't want to be going back to members and say, okay, membership this year is 35, next year is 45 and 55, to be able to keep sending you magazines, because most people probably go along and say, I get the magazine, but I really want to be able to scroll through it on my phone. I'm at work, or I'm sitting in the duck blind, deer blind, something along those lines. I can scroll through it. If I want to look at last month's edition, I can scroll over and look at that one, and get in sync with the 21st century, with what people are used to doing.
How they're used to consuming media, which media has changed dramatically, and I don't know. What are your thoughts on kind of new media? And by that, how do you feel the NRA is doing with its current approach to social media in particular? And what sorts of changes, if any, would you want to see happen with that? I mean, we're talking, today's world, people, honestly, the thing that they are consuming the most of are shorts and reels on social media.
TikToks, YouTube, things like that. I think there's a great opportunity there, especially when it comes to like responsibility. If you went along and had a short TikTok video that talked about responsible firearm storage, when you go along and have a YouTube reel that would explain the 4 safe gun handling rules, different things like that people can look at. And quite honestly, it's not going to be somebody like me reading it from a script. You want somebody who has some, maybe somebody from Hollywood, and maybe maybe a politician, but somebody who wants to get the message out. You can do a short reel, do a short TikTok, make it fun, make sure people, realize what's going on, and get out there. Because currently, NRA has a very minimal presence when it comes, when it comes to social media. Part of that, you got YouTube, you've got Facebook that just doesn't like guns at all, and that's been tough. They need to figure out ways around it, maybe hosting some of it on their own servers where they can control it, different things along those lines. But also, to your point, they've got to figure out how do they meet their members and potential members where they are, because we're not going to go along and force people away from TikTok or from YouTube Reels. We're going to have to go along and figure out some way of working with it for it.
Absolutely. Frankly, TikTok's probably the most restrictive of the bunch. I definitely think that Facebook and Instagram, for instance, are like, it's actually not that hard to work around the rules on those platforms. Even for a gun-specific gun rights, organization. But I'd say that from what I've observed, the current strategy is not particularly effective. It's not reaching the people that you want to reach, especially if you're looking to grow membership as well. So I'd like to see them, bring somebody on board, hire a team that's got some strengths in kind of overhauling the social media strategy there.
Well, the good thing that they've already done is the old marketing firm, I think, was that contract terminated around the May-June timeframe, and they've got a new marketing firm that specializes in nonprofits such as the NRA, and helping us to get a better focus on social media. Also, by going along and pulling in membership in the ILA as well as the development groups underneath one department will also help out, because you've got people that were very talented, but their talents weren't being utilized properly all the way around. And that's where this is a monstrous aircraft carrier that is going to take some time to turn around. They've done some really good changes this year so far, and I'm hoping to make next year get on the board and also help continue making changes there, because we need the NRA.
Agreed. I've been pretty consistent on saying that, even at times of my own disillusionment with the organization. I have always believed that it's an important organization that needs to continue on and needs to continue doing the work of the people in fighting for our rights. And we are better for it by having an organization like the NRA than we are without it. As we're kind of, we're over an hour here, but allowed it to go a little bit longer, and that's totally cool. but I'd like to hear from you kind of a summary. What do you feel you bring to the NRA as an organization, as a candidate for the board of directors? Why should people vote for you? And give them their pitch for like you got to give the pitch to get people to actually get engaged, to get out there and cast votes. So let's hear it, Rob.
The first thing I would say, the NRA's had problems over the last 5 years, particularly. I want to get on the board of directors to bring my energy, to bring my knowledge for it. Professionally, I'm an IT project manager. I work in large corporations. I do large global projects on a regular basis. So I understand about coordinating. I understand about messaging for it in the enterprise, and also outside the enterprise. Running my podcast for the last 6 years has also put me in contact with a lot of knowledgeable people that have helped my understanding about the gun industry as a whole, and also I think has given me resources that I can pull on, that I can go along and bring to help the NRA from an education training standpoint, from a membership organization standpoint, and make a difference for it. I know things aren't going to change overnight, but I'm hoping with applied effort and just tenacity that the NRA will turn around. I've been a member of the board for the Ohio Rifle and Pistol Association now for about the last 5 years, and we've been able to turn the organization around and make some really good inroads from that. We still have more things we want to do, but it's taking that from just a state level organization. I want to take the same kind of tenacity and bring it up to the NRA, and making those changes so that members are proud of the NRA, making sure that the education training will meet the members' needs, and also making sure the minorities, those different demographics that haven't felt that the NRA represented them, that they realize that they do want them to be part of it, that they do represent their interests when it comes to the Second Amendment.
Awesome. Hey, folks, a couple of resources to leave you with before we close this up. Rob gave me a couple of links here. And the first one is called electanewNRA.com, electanewNRA.com. I'm going to go ahead and post that. It's already in the episode description as well as in the episode show notes. I'm dropping it in the comments for those that are joining us here live as well. And the other one, and by the way, so on that page, you can see some information about kind of the purpose behind this electanewNRA.com site. There's some resources there talking about, like right here, there's a page called Who the Candidates Are That Want to Save the NRA, and one here that says Who Voted to Destroy the NRA. It's probably some good stuff to review. There's also a link at the top. If you click on this button, it says Candidates 2026, and this has a list of candidates that I'll let you speak to this, Rob, but as to who some of these folks are on here, not necessarily you have to go into specific people, but just kind of like who is represented on this electanewNRA.com site. Why are they there, and why should people know about this as a resource?
Yeah, the candidates that are on the electanewNRA.com website, these are the reform candidates, and we are working together to make sure that that when we're talking about transparency for members, that the financial accountability, all those things are being brought to bear. And as I was saying before, we got 19 out of the 26 positions this year switched over to reform candidates. That's allowed a lot of changes to happen. We're hoping to bring even more people onto the board, because as we bring these people onto the board, they're not super well-known people. They're people that have a passion for the NRA. They're people that really want to add their energy to it, and by doing that, we're hoping to make a stronger NRA.
Awesome. So go check that out, electanewNRA.com. And then the other one, which you pointed me to, which I think is pretty interesting, There is a website called nrapresident.com, title of it here, President's Forum. And I'll let you expound upon this as well. But and you're going to need your NRA membership number to. It's not like a true login per se, but it's really just a filter to keep bots and different people that we don't want necessarily on this site. So you just drop your NRA membership number when that page first loads, and it'll take you to a page with a bunch of information on key topics, and there's some data and different things about the current leadership and what they see as being the priorities and plans for the future. And I've been kind of poking my way around it, and it's really interesting. I think this is a good step forward in the direction of transparency for the president of the NRA and leadership of the NRA. Something that, again, people have been asking for a long time is greater transparency from the organization.
Yeah, I invite any NRA member. Again, you got to have a valid membership number in order to access the information on the site. But to go out there and read it, you've got the president's column to read what Bill Bockenberg has has been saying in the different columns each month, and you can read them in one place. You can also go along and read email responses. Doug Hamlin and Bill Bockenbeck spent a lot of time going along responding to members' questions, complaints about things, and you can read in there that they are not sugarcoating things. They are saying, yes, we screwed up for it, and this is what we're doing to fix it. And that's anybody who's ever had a problem, the first step is to acknowledge you've got a problem, and then you can work on finding a solution to it. And that's what Bill and Doug have started doing, is they know what the problems are. They for the first time in 5 years, 2025, the NRA will have a balanced budget and will be in the black for it. The last 5 years has been in the red for it. In 2025, well, we've got membership growth already. That's the first time in 5 years for it. So there are a lot of good positive signs that have already been taken, and those are some of the small steps. There's still a lot of big steps. When we're talking about social media, when we're talking about marketing, when we're talking about reaching out to these different demographics, those are the bigger steps. But the first step has already been taken. That is acknowledging we've got a problem. Now we've got to find effective solutions to dealing with those problems.
Yeah. To your point, you mentioned how the president has responded to a number of emails directly and has shared many of these responses on this website, nrapresident.com. It's got, actually, if you click on that portion of the site, it's got a breakdown of recurring themes that he's heard from members through, many, many, many emails that have come in. And so he's kind of identified what those are. He's also then identified age group analysis. So by age groups, like basically 60 to 90 years old, 40 to 59 years old, 20 to 39 years old, seeing kind of a trend of different, focus, points or issues that people were kind of in those age groups tend to kind of hone in on, and identifying some key priorities to address those concerns from those different age groups. And then you go down further and you can actually click on actual emails that have come in to him and that he's written point by point responses to. Like, just I'll give you an example here in case folks are curious. Like this one right here says, "I do not intend to renew my membership until this happens." And the complaint here is that this member was upset about Wayne LaPierre and his cohorts for the money they improperly accessed and spent. He will not renew his membership until essentially accountability has taken place for money that the leadership spends and has access to. So you can read the whole response from Bill on what his thoughts are on this and where they're going as a leadership and what they're going to do to protect the organization from those kinds of abuses in the future. So that's just one example. So pretty cool website here. And again, I've posted those in the chat for those that are viewing online here on Facebook and YouTube, and in the show description and show notes. So good stuff. Thanks for pointing us to these resources, Rob. Well,
Thank you.
this has been eye-opening and a fascinating discussion, and I appreciate your time to connect today and to do the podcast together. Folks, you can find Rob on his own podcast, which is the Firearm Trainers Podcast, part of the concealedcarry.com podcast network. He puts out an episode pretty much every week. He's more consistent than we are on the Concealed Carry podcast, unfortunately, but we're trying to do better here. And so, if you may think that, well, I'm not a firearm trainer or an instructor or anything like that. I have always enjoyed listening to your episodes, and I think there's a lot of valuable information shared on your podcast, even for non-instructors. So it's worth checking out. And lots of interesting people on and great interviews. And so that's the Firearm Trainers Podcast. Anything else you want to say or plug, Rob, before we say goodbye?
The only thing I'll say is I'm trying to be very much of a open book to any members that's got questions and different things like that, because whether I make it to the board or not, I think the bigger thing is make sure people, if you've got a firearm, support the NRA, and if you've got questions, I'll give you my personal email address for it, which is scouter65@gmail.com, SCOUTER65@gmail.com. And I'll respond back with the best information I have. I have nothing to hide, and at the same time want to make sure people realize that the NRA that we're seeing in 2025 is different than what it was in 2024, and there is a dedicated group of reformers that I think have very good control of what the NRA is doing now, that are really trying to refocus it to make sure that it does what it should be doing in protecting our Second Amendment rights, as well as going along and making sure, promoting, responsible, firearm ownership.
Awesome. I appreciate you being comfortable to give people your direct line there. And that shows a lot, as far as how important it is to you to also connect with NRA members or prospective members to hear their concerns and questions. And I look forward to seeing you get elected to the board. I hope that people will consider to vote for you as well. Now, the voting information and ballots and all that will become available, will be sent out in February. I think you said
February magazines.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so towards the end of the month of January, when the February issue is going out, you can look for all of the board of director election information in that issue. So that'll be coming here in a little more than a month. So, yep. or close to a month. Some of those I don't know exactly the timeline of when things get mailed out, but it seems like for me about the third week of each month is when I get my American Rifleman magazine.
Yeah. It'll be dependent upon the post office, as they say,
Yep, absolutely.
And one thing too, I would really encourage, I've talked to many NRA members that have said they've never voted in an election in the past because they just didn't see the need for it. Mm-hmm. Remember, this is a member organization, and your voice can make a big difference. One of the things that I've pointed out to people too, when it comes to how your vote matters, the 25 people that got elected, the 26th, 27th, 28th people, and for this year's election were separated by less than 200 votes. When you go along and think about it, if there were just a few more people that voted, some of those people might have moved up into the first 25 there.
Yeah.
So your vote does count. Take a look at the newNRA.com website. Understand who you're voting for. If you don't want to vote for me, great, but look and see who you're voting for, and make sure you're voting the candidates that you feel that can do the best job possible for the NRA and for you.
Yeah, good stuff. Good stuff. Well, this has been a great episode. Thank you, Rob, again for joining us and doing the podcast with us today. Guys, a reminder of today's episode sponsors were HK, as well as POM Pepper Spray. We appreciate your support of our sponsors that make doing what we do here possible. And if you enjoyed this content, if you enjoyed this podcast, feel free to let us know. If you have any questions, concerns, or episode suggestions, you want to reach out, you can email us at podcast@concealedcarry.com. And please like and share and subscribe and do all the things, people. Help us spread the word and grow and continue our mission to educating and informing and reaching people on concealed carry and related topics. Until next time, A reminder to train right, train often, and train safe so you can fight hard, fight fast, and fight true. Take care.